the globe, as Mr. started. As I introduced myself, I want to talk today a little bit about the brutally competitive market in which we all do business. The marketplace today is as competitive as ever. We have strong expectations from shareholders, from customers, from colleagues to produce in a very competitive environment. I don't believe the environment is going to get any less competitive anytime soon, and so we have to constantly find ways to stay on the edge, to stay ahead when it comes to selling our products and services. As a sales consultant, I spend a great deal of time listening to other sales consultants, and I spend a great deal of time listening to their recordings and reading their books. And oftentimes I'll find myself in a workshop or a conference in which I'm one of many speakers. And when that happens, I always enjoy listening to what the other people have to say for a lot of reasons. One, I learn from it, and the other one is I just want to be aware of what else the audience is hearing. And lately, over the last couple of years, I have been hearing a lot of speakers talk about how relationship selling is dead. You know, when you think of relationship selling, you think about finding out who the client or prospect really is, what makes that person tick, what they truly value, and then finding some way to build a relationship with them that you can use to make a sale, and far more importantly, keep a person as a client for many years to come. A lot of people are saying this is dead. And the reason they say that is because so many things have changed over the last 20 years. The internet has made it so that purchasers and people of any kind can find out whatever information they want about a product or service at any given time. And because of that, people believe that the sales cycle is so fast that there's no time to build a relationship with a client. Furthermore, the whole world has sped up. We make decisions so quickly. Buyers are under extreme duress in many cases because they're trying to do so much in their job, and in many cases they're doing their jobs with fewer resources than they had before because of the same competitive world I'm talking about. And then that has led some people to say, well, you know, everything is social, everything is virtual. Really, if you're just trying to sell something, you put your product out there, you have a very sophisticated virtual marketing plan, and that pretty much just takes care of itself. Well, I'm here to tell you that while the world definitely is in hyperactive, fast-paced mode, relationship selling is not dead. It is actually alive and well. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, I believe we could make an argument that relationship selling today is more important than ever because of the crazy and frenzied marketplace in which we work. People, customers, buyers are craving attention, they're craving good service, they're craving someone who will just actually listen to them, and they desperately want providers, vendors, sellers who will customize the product or service to their unique needs. So in today's environment, relationship selling is as healthy as ever. It's just a lot different than it used to be. And so if we're going to accept that, the next thing we have to understand are what are the most important words when it comes to relationship selling. And these are two basic words that have been a part of the sales lexicon for many, many years. And they are, number one, trust, and number two, value. Trust and value. Trust and value. If you've been selling or in sales, or if you have led sales teams for a long period of time, those words probably mean a great deal to you, and you have used those words many times. When I think of trust in the relationship selling paradigm that we're in 2016, I think of sequentially building a stronger relationship over a period of time with a prospect as quickly and as efficiently as you can. And then I also think of it as deepening it and building it and expanding upon it over decades with a career-long customer. While we are building trust, and we'll talk a little bit more later about how we do that and the steps that we take, but while we're building trust, we must also determine exactly what it is that our prospects value without any ambiguity and without ever making assumption. We have to figure out what it is they value without any ambiguity and without making assumptions. The first thing I have to tell you when it comes to value is that we do not determine it. Value lives in your client's head. Value lives in your client's brain, not yours, not mine. And I ask you to kind of think about what that statement means to you. Value lives in your client's brain, not yours. Because so many times we jump in and assume or maybe assign a value to a prospect. And I don't care how long you or your staff have been selling a certain product or service, the temptation to assume and assign value is always there. We can never succumb to that temptation. Always remember that they determine it. The other thing when it comes to value I would like to ask you is this. Without necessarily answering per se, ask yourself, how many years have you been in your current industry? How many years have you been selling your current company? How many years have you been selling your current products or services? If the number is more than 10, you have to be careful when it comes to value. I'll tell you what I mean. In most cases, having a great deal of tenure and experience in your position is an attribute. It's a virtue, it's a competitive benefit that you have over other professionals. But in at least one way, having a great deal of tenure and experience can be a detriment. It can be a weakness. For the more you know, the more you have experienced, and the longer you have been peddling your products, the more vulnerable you are to assuming client value. It just happens. And I think the reason for it is that you know the product so deeply. And for all you sales leaders out there, this applies to your sales teams as well. You know your product so deeply, and the deeper you know it, the easier it is to just assume that other people. The other thing is, when you know it deeply, you start to get deep into the details. You understand the inner workings and what makes it move and what makes it tick. And sometimes because of that, as a specialist and as a person with detailed knowledge, you start to focus on the minutia. And in many cases, that minutia only matters to you, or maybe only matters to a small percentage of the people. You have to find out what it is that your prospect values and only focus on those things that he or she cares about. One other question, or two other things I'd like to ask you rather when it comes to value. First of all, when you think about some of your best clients, what are some of the things they most commonly value about you? What are some of the things they most commonly value about the product or service that you sell? Think about that. And then I would also encourage you to write down 5 things your best clients most value about you, your company, and your products and services. And you can do that while we're talking here today, or perhaps you may decide to do it afterwards. But with that, I want to ask you another question that I think is critically important for the rest of today's webinar, and that is this. I would like you to take a moment and just close your eyes. And while you have your eyes closed, I want you to picture the name and the face of your best client. Now, I made that a pretty broad question on purpose. The name and face of your best client. Picture that person, and only you know why your best client is your best client. Only you know why one person deserves to have that lofty position in your mind. But I'm hoping you have envisioned a name and a face. And now ask yourself the question that you see on your screen. Why is your best client your best client? Why is your best client your best client? What is it about that person that makes them so important to you? Why do you like that person so much? And I suspect that the answers you are saying in your mind or even out loud have something to do with this. You're saying, I trust that person trusts me. My best client is my best client because he gives me referral business. My best client is so important to me because he's been with me for 10, 20, 30 years. Perhaps your best client is the one who generates the most revenue for you. Maybe you have developed a personal friendship and you spend time socially with your best client. As I said, only you know why your best client is your best client, but you all have one. And I like to say that a person's best client is their best client because you can tell them no when they need to hear it and have no fear whatsoever that that person would ever leave you for another competitor. Folks, the reason why a best client is a best client is because you have taken the time to build trust with that person, and that person has built trust with you, and in so doing, you have figured out exactly what your best client values, and you do a good job of figuring out how to deliver that value. You have customized that value and delivered it straight and directly to them. So we're going to take a few moments now, and we are going to focus on determining value, how you find value, how you go about figuring out what it is without being fooled or misled. And the first thing I would like to do in order to get us started down this path of determining exactly what it is that clients value is to just get your frame of mind in the right place. Because in general, buyers, whether they be business-to-business buyers, business-to-consumer buyers, or some other type of buyer, in general, buyers have a lot of concerns. You know, their concerns could be personal if it's a B2C purchasing situation. But many of the concerns and emotions that business-to-consumer buyers feel are also felt by business-to-business buyers. I mean, think about your own experiences. When you, as a professional, have had to purchase something on behalf of your company, much of your job success depends on the job you do, ferreting out vendors and choosing the right products and services at just the right price. So there's always emotion involved in buying decisions, even if it is a B2B business decision. So as you can see on the screen that appears, or rather the sheet that appears on your screen, the buyer's 8 key concerns. Number one, buyers ask themselves, does this product or service save me money? Does the product or service save me money? That is critically important for a lot of reasons because, again, many times people are judged based on how good of stewards they are of the company's budget. Number two, buyers tend to be concerned about products making them money. Does this product or service make our company more profit and more revenue? And if the answer is yes, that's certainly a good thing. Number three, does the product reduce my stress? If I am a overworked person in a company your company is targeting to make a sale, I want a product that doesn't cause me a lot of trouble. I don't want a lot of startup time. I don't want to have to learn a great deal. I don't want the process of learning about the product and making the transaction take a long time or cause me difficulty. Does it reduce my stress? And very similar, number four, does this product save me time? Again, pretty much the same thing. Your buyers are time-starved, and I suspect over the next 5 to 10 years, your buyers will be even more time-starved than they are here in 2016. Number five, is the product or service easy to use? Again, I don't want to have a lot of trouble. Now, the last three start to get a little more emotional and personal. Number six, does it provide security? Now, business-to-business buyers will see this sixth concern both personally and institutionally. Does it provide me security as an individual professional, i.e., does it protect my job, make me look good in front of my superior, etc.? And then, just as important, does it provide my company with security, whatever that means? Everyone wants to be safe, and every company wants to be secured in its purchases. Number seven, does it boost my ego? Again, I'm talking about both the personal ego of the purchaser involved and the institutional ego of the company. And finally, does this product make me feel good about myself personally and institutionally? When it comes down to it, those are the things that people typically care. But there's one problem. Your clients individually are never typical. Every person has their own unique attributes. Every person has their own strengths and weaknesses. Every person has their fears and other emotions. So we have to figure out, as I said before, exactly what it is that prospects value without ever making any assumptions. And I'd like to share a story with you just for a moment at this point in time. I once interviewed a person who owns a public relations and sales consulting firm for an article that I wrote. I write an article about every week, and I'm always looking for people to inspire those articles, and so I often interview other professionals and kind of write something based on their career experiences. At one point, a couple years ago, I interviewed a person by the name of Pam Lantos. Pam is an accomplished sales consultant and a person who's done very well in life, but she wasn't always that great person. She's probably, I'm guessing, and now that I'm going to say her age, I hope she's not listening to this webinar today, but I'm guessing she is perhaps about 60 years old. And so Pam has been doing great things for a long time, but early in her life, when she was only in her 20s, she was a self-described depressed, overweight housewife. She was a depressed, overweight housewife, and she didn't like being not so physically fit, and she was kind of wanting a job, something to challenge her. And so she got a job at the local fitness club, because there she thought she could do two things at once: get a job that would get her out of the house for a little while and become in better shape physically. So she went to the fitness club and applied for the job, and she was offered the job and accepted it. So she was quite excited, and she shows up for her first day at the job, and the manager of the fitness club says to her, "Pam, the best way to learn this new position is to simply follow me and observe what I do, and eventually you'll understand how the fitness club works." Okay, so the manager started doing his daily work, and Pam just shadowed or observed her new boss. Well, at one point in time, about 15 minutes later, the front door to the gym opened up, and in came a person dressed very professionally, and she came up to the front counter and said, "I just found out I have to go to a corporate retreat in Mexico this summer. I have 4 months to look good in front of all of my coworkers, the CEO, and the board of directors. What can you do for me?" Well, the manager of the gym was quite pleased, as you might imagine, because this was a person who was seriously interested in his products and services and seriously in need. And so the manager says, "Well, you came to the right spot, and we are happy you are here." And the first thing he did was pull out a four-color glossy brochure and started to explain the features and the benefits of the gymnasium. And then, of course, if for any of you who've ever joined a fitness club or a gym, you know that they always take you on a tour. So the manager said, "Okay, let's go on a tour, and I'll show you all that the gym has to offer." They saw the swimming pool, they saw the weightlifting area, they saw the place where they teach fitness classes, and eventually they arrived into the room where they had all of the cardiovascular exercise equipment. And while there, the manager pointed out one of the machines to this prospective customer, this prospective member of the gym, and the manager said, "If you use this machine, you will lower your blood pressure, you will avoid a heart attack, and you will also prevent a stroke." It was at that moment that Pam, the new person, first day on the job, kindly interrupted the manager and said, "May I say something?" And the manager said, yes, please, go ahead." And Pam said, "What this all means is that if you come to this gym and do the things we prescribe, you will not only be comfortable with how you look at the corporate retreat in Mexico this coming summer, you'll be very proud of how you look and will help you move up in your job. At that point, ladies and gentlemen, you could get out the contract and have this prospective sign up, because that is what the prospective gym member wanted to hear. The prospective member wanted to hear that the gym would make that person look better, feel better, and help them be more successful in their career. Now, isn't it interesting that the manager who had been there for 20 years and knew that gym better than anyone else and had done a great job of building up the fitness club and making it profitable, this was a successful manager of the gym. Isn't it interesting that he didn't see and focus exactly on what the prospect valued, but the new person there on the first day of the job did? And I believe the reason for it is because the manager saw everything in too great of detail and had been there so long. I mean, if you think about it, the manager probably studied that exercise equipment in a catalog long before making the purchase. Again, he had to analyze whether the machine could be durable and hold up to daily use, if it could last for 5 years and be depreciated. He needed to find out if the customers would like it, if it had all of the features that exercise gym members wanted. So he saw it in such a detailed manner. But this client, this prospective customer, didn't really care about that. Folks, we have to dig deep and figure out exactly what it is that people care about. Just a little bit ago, I showed you and shared with you those 8 key concerns that buyers tend to have. Not every buyer has every one of those concerns in every purchasing decision. And even if he does, some of them matter more to one person than another. Another person's ego could be very much wrapped up into a purchase, and another person who's far more humble and modest might not really value the ego side of it terribly much. So we have to find that value. And so then you're probably thinking to yourself, how do we go about doing that? And there are a number of things we need to do. But first and foremost, when it comes to selling, we need to listen and truly hear. We need to listen and truly hear. You know, I often interview chief executive officers of major companies. I like to interview general sales managers, chief sales officers, and vice presidents of sales. And I'm always asking them detailed questions because as a sales consultant, I want to know everything I possibly can about being successful in sales and connecting with prospects. And I'll never forget a time in which I was interviewing the CEO of a medium-sized company, maybe about 3,000 employees, so a nice-sized medium company. And it was a successful company, and the CEO had done a great job in driving revenue growth and expanding the company outside of its region. And I remember asking him a question that I almost always ask CEOs or chief sales officers, and that is, when it ultimately comes down to it, what is the single most important thing you can do or a company can do when it comes to attracting new customers? And you want to know what he said? He said, you have to listen and truly hear. And when he said that, I sighed a little bit and my face fell, and I said to him, sir, with all due respect, you do have to listen, but the statement you made is perhaps the greatest cliche in all of business. Everyone says you need to listen, but it seems as if hardly anyone ever does. And when I said that to him, he got a big smile on his face, and he said, Jeff, I said you need to listen and truly hear. You need to listen and truly hear. And he went on and started talking about his philosophy of listening deeply and truly hearing from clients. And it reminded me of an experience I had way back when I was in graduate school at the university. When I was in grad school, I had a graduate assistantship in which I worked for the university, and it was a very enjoyable job. And one of the things we did every month was meet in a big room with all of the other graduate assistants, and we would experience a professional development training seminar. We would be brought in, and we would learn one aspect that was designed to help us be more successful in our professional lives. And one month, the speaker was an active listening expert. This person was a guru in active listening, and she said things that I had heard before and made sense to me. You know, she said, when you listen to someone, don't cross your arms and fold your arms and cross your legs. And the speaker said, show interest with your eyes and be aware of everything that's going on and repeat back what the person says. And then you will be an active listener. And again, it all made sense to me. And at one point, the speaker said, okay, now we're going to break into pairs, and we are going to practice the active listening that we've just learned. All right, everyone grumbled a little bit because no one really wanted to do that, but we all broke into pairs, and I was sitting next to a person, and so we decided that that person would talk first, and I would listen first. And then the instructor said he's going to blow a whistle, and then we will switch roles, and the other person will talk and listen, and you know how that all goes if you've ever been to a seminar. And so the whistle blew, and my discussion partner, he started talking, and as he's talking, I'm thinking to myself, okay, don't have my arms crossed, don't cross my legs, lean forward, nod my head, show a lot of interest with my eyes, make noises like, oh, okay, And I was paraphrasing back some of the things that he said. And after about 20 seconds of this, I happened to take a moment and glance around the room to see how some of the other pairs of people were doing in this exercise. As I looked around, I thought to myself, wow, I'm pretty good at this. And so I went back to listening. And I was paraphrasing back what people said. And then I found myself looking around again, and I thought to myself, I might be one of the best active listeners at the whole university. And eventually, the whistle blew, and the speaker said, switch roles. And it was at that point in time that I realized I had no idea what the other person had said, because I was spending too much time making it look like I was actively listening. I was spending time going through the motions. I was spending time thinking of my next question. I would like to tell you that not listening and actively truly hearing is the greatest weakness that your sales team most likely has. It's the greatest weakness they have. And I can tell you why. Because in most cases, the people who tend to go into sales are extroverts. They're the people who like to talk. I mean, when they were a kid, they probably are a good communicator and a good talker, and maybe they could convince someone to do things, and their parents or some other mentor said to the person, you should go into sales when you grow up. So they went into sales. Now, ladies and gentlemen, extroverted, outgoing people do make good salespeople in that when it's time to make a call, they don't have as much call reluctance. I mean, you know, if you've ever prospected, when you're first getting started in sales, you pick up the phone and you have that sometimes that sick feeling in your stomach, that hesitation, because you're worried that you'll get rejected when you get on the phone. And an extrovert or an outgoing person has an advantage with that because he or she is more likely to pick up that phone and make that call. Similarly, extroverts do a good job if they have to do a sales presentation in front of a large group. But in a lot of cases, the introverts are better. In a lot of cases, when it comes time to building trust and figuring out exactly what your prospects value, the introverts will be better salesmen than the extroverts because you have to listen and truly hear. Here's a quick guideline for you and your sales team. Every time you are with a prospect, make sure that you spend 2/3 of the time listening or questioning, and only spend 1/3 of the time talking about you, your company, or your products and services. And for a lot of people, this is so counterintuitive because our natural feeling and inclination in sales is to talk. I can go and meet with a company's sales team and work with them all day long and focus very heavily on this, and inevitably the next day when I go and accompany some of them on field visits to actually meet with real prospects, they'll end up talking all the time. And they'll end up talking almost the whole time. And occasionally they'll glance over to me and you can see this look on their face, oh, I need to ask questions, and then they'll ask a question. But they don't really listen and truly hear. And so it's hard to do this because salespeople have it ingrained in their head to talk, but we need to actually listen. Listen 2/3 of the time, and only speak 1/3 of the time. Here's the other thing that's really important for you to share with the rest of your sales team. Never be thinking of the next question you're going to ask while they're answering your most recent question. Never do it. Most of us fall into that trap because you're thinking to yourself, okay, I just asked them this question. Now I'm trying to think, what am I going to ask them that's interesting and all that? No, no, no. Listen deeply to what they're saying. And if you listen deeply to what they're saying and let it soak into your brain will know what question to ask because it'll be the next thing that logically comes to your brain. One of the best pieces of advice I have to end with when it comes to listening and truly hearing is that if you are in sales or even if you're the owner of the company trying to work a major deal with another company, we need to listen the way a criminal detective listens. And I know that sounds maybe like a strange and probably overly bold statement, but we do. If you think about it, a criminal detective is trying to listen to someone who has a vested interest in concealing the truth. And so that detective has to dig deep, remove layers, and go quite a bit below the surface in order to find the truth. Now, hopefully, our sales relationships aren't quite as adversarial and as high pressure as a criminal interrogation, but it's probably safe to say that in many cases your clients or prospective clients don't want you to know the entire truth, perhaps because they're afraid it will hurt their negotiating position when it comes time to figure out price, and maybe they're not even thinking about it. But remember, the surface hides the truth. We have to go below the surface and figure out what it is, and we can only do that by listening and truly hearing. The next way that we can figure out exactly what prospects value is to never assume. I've talked about this earlier, but we can never, ever assume. It is so tempting to do that. Remember that the more you've been doing something, the more experience you have, the more exposure you have. And I find that the longer I have been in sales, and I've been selling something or another my entire career, I find that every new prospect now reminds me of a previous prospect. And there's a vulnerability, because it is so natural for your brain to make the jump. If a person reminds you of a previous prospect, your brain just starts to assume that the person is just like the previous prospect. And that's a deadly assumption, because no two people are alike. No two situations are alike. No two times are alike. People change. Businesses are different, and the times from one sale to another have changed as well. So always take the time to figure out what each person values individually, because no two are alike, and we cannot make that assumption. Next, we need to ask probing questions. Probing questions. Many salespeople are superficial. They just like to make small talk, or what I call chit-chat. Now, if you think about the typical salesperson, they're probably pretty good at chit-chat. Again, they're most likely an extroverted person, and they grew up thinking that salespeople talk all the time. So they go in and meet with a prospect, and they ask questions like, how was your weekend? What do you ask them about some of their hobbies, some of the things going on in the company. And often after they do just that chit-chat, they start launching into features and benefits. You'll recall the little story I shared a few moments ago about the would-be member of the fitness club, Jim, who came in. And do you remember what the manager of that fitness club did when the would-be customer walked in the front door? He got out the glossy four-color brochure, and he started to, as I say, vomit up features and benefits. Nobody wants that. No customer wants to hear that. They want everything customized. This is especially true with sophisticated clients, with business-to-business clients, and it's especially true with any client who's making a large ticket item purchase. If it's an expensive purchase, they want it very customized. We need to ask probing questions. We make sales not by the statements we make, but by the questions we ask. We do more business by the questions we ask than the statements we make. And so we must always be asking the probing questions. What are probing questions? Well, these are the ones that get the client to answer in detail. Probing questions are the questions that get people to explain, to expand upon. And remember, as I said a little earlier in today's webinar, B2B decisions are also emotional. They're always emotional. Anyone who thinks that business-to-business decisions are 100% rational is kidding himself, because emotion always plays a part. And so we want to dig in and figure out what are those emotional motivating factors, because that can help us figure out how to sell. Dig in and dig deep. Now, eventually, what will happen when you're asking probing questions about what is making a client motivated, what problems they really need to have solved, when you're asking those deep questions, the prospect eventually will start to lead you down a path. You'll just feel it. And for many of you, as I'm telling you this, you're nodding your heads because you're thinking, yes, yes. Eventually a client starts to lead you down a path, and you feel like you're going somewhere that's going to eventually lead you to a sale. We'll always let the client, the prospect, lead you down that path. Let me repeat. Always let the prospect lead you down a path. Oftentimes when you start to go down a path toward a certain end, you're feeling excited, you're feeling good about that because you realize your questioning is paying off and you're going somewhere. And when that happens, all of a sudden that temptation to assume pops into your head. The temptation to assume pops in your head as soon as you go down a path, because they're going to say something which triggers a thought in your brain, and if you are the extroverted salesman who loves to talk, you're going to want to jump in and say it. So when you feel that temptation, maybe you might need to say to yourself, have I asked all the questions? Do I need to ask something else? And that leads us to the next thing that's critically important when it comes to figuring out what people value, and that is, please do not talk too soon. Remember, listen 2/3 of the time, only talk 1/3 of the time, and generally speaking, the bulk of your third is going to be later in the meeting, because we want to figure out the early stuff. So we have to listen and truly hear. We have to ask the probing questions that dig deep, let the client lead us down a path. Sometimes we have to nudge him or her down the path, but always let them lead you down the path. And don't talk. You want to know when you talk? When you talk, the time to talk is when you are 100% convinced that you know exactly what the prospect wants. And when it comes time to talk, you will then portray your product's inner workings, the features and benefits, if you will, in a way that is directly customized to what the prospect has just told you he or she values. So we don't talk too soon, and when we do, we make sure we do it the right way. Okay, I've been focusing a great deal on value, but now we're going to kind of start to finish up with some trust talk. Like I said, we want to build value, or rather we want to determine value, but we have to simultaneously build trust. And I believe we need to do that sequentially. You'll see before you what I call the trusting relationship ladder. I like to think every client starts at the bottom of the ladder. So if you meet a new person, the first thing you want to do is just make it to the bottom rung of the ladder. And the lowest point in the trusting relationship ladder is rapport. You simply want to build rapport when you meet a new person. And that's very elementary. It simply means two people like each other. I like you, you like me. A positive feeling exists between two people. That's great. Once you have it, you can focus on the second rung, or the second level, and that is an ongoing relationship. Relationship takes rapport and puts some permanence to it. We get relationship perhaps when we have our second meeting with a prospective client. And once we have a relationship, then we're going to shoot for the third rung on the ladder. And that third rung on the ladder is trust. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about how we develop that trust, but suffice it to say that we want to work towards trust once we have a relationship. And when we have that, all things become possible, and that's when we can sign an agreement or make a sale. When trust is perpetual and constantly strengthens over time, a person becomes a best client. And that is the person you imagine when someone asks you to close your eyes and think of your very best client. So we don't need to do everything at all at once. Just build trust sequentially. But here's some good news. The more you determine exactly what it is that prospective clients value, the deeper the trust goes and the faster you climb the ladder. Meanwhile, the more trust you start to develop, the easier it is to figure value out. And so both of those trust and value things benefit each other, they contribute to one another and help each other out. And so that's why we need to do them simultaneously to build a strong client relationship. So how do we develop trust? Number one, we pass a moment of truth. We need to pass a moment of truth. A moment of truth is when you have the opportunity to do something in your best interest, but you choose to do something in the client's best interest. Past that moment of truth, suddenly a basic level of trust exists. Past a few moment of truths, and strongly established trust exists. Number two, we want to show consistent performance over time. Three, behave like a fiduciary. A fiduciary is a person who legally puts his or her own interest ahead of their clients. For instance, an accountant or an attorney or a real estate agent, what we would think would behave like a fiduciary. Even if you are not in a position in which you are required to behave like a fiduciary, those sales reps who do tend to develop trust faster with their prospective clients. And then finally, be absolutely responsive. And when I think of responsive, I think of a book I read by one of my colleagues, a man by the name of Andy Paul. Andy is the author of Selling in Zero Time, or rather, Zero Time Selling is the name of the book. It came out, I think, maybe last year, but an outstanding book. And Andy Paul argues that the race to make a sale doesn't go to the swift, it goes to the most responsive. And again, you'll remember I told you earlier that the world is moving so fast and clients are sophisticated. Well, with all of the information that's available on the internet and all of the reviews that existing clients can make about your products and your companies, it is now estimated that about 70 to 75% of the sales cycle is already taken care of and completed by the prospective client before that prospect even calls you or your sales reps. So you only have 25 to 30% of the sales cycle remaining after someone calls you or your team to make an impression. Because of that, Andy Paul argues, we have to move far more faster. You know, in the olden days, like 5 years ago, it was acceptable to say, as long as you return a phone call or an email within 24 hours, you should be fine. Well, that's not fast enough anymore. If you don't return it within an hour, that person is probably going on to your competitor. And in some cases, I'm not saying this is fair, I'm not saying this is good, it's just reality. In some cases, if you don't return it instantly, they've moved on to your competitor. So Andy Paul recommends that we sell according to an acronym called MILT, M-I-L-T. And that stands for Maximum Impact in the Least Amount of Time. How do you do that? Well, Andy Paul says each client must be the center of your universe. Nothing matters more than when you are with them. Follow up on 100% of all sales leads. That statement sounds probably pretty obvious, but in my sales consulting practice, I am continually shocked about the number of sales leads at some companies that are never addressed. Nobody ever follows up on those sales leads. Each one of those is potential business just waiting to be had, and there are some estimates done by some sales scholars, if you will, estimating that 50% of sales leads are never properly followed up upon. We can't afford that. Do everything now while providing unconditional support, and make sure that you record everything in your CRM immediately after talking with a prospect, for fear that you might forget a detail that could have an impact on your ability to make that sale. So in the end, as we work solidly and vigorously to develop trust and to figure out what it is that exactly what people value, in the end we share with them what we offer. We make our pitch. And hopefully we have a very nice pitch that is well designed and appeals to people. But it's very important to periodically ask ourselves and ask our sales teams, do we really do what we say we do? Do we really do what we say we do? Do we still do what we say we do? And I'll share with you a very elementary example, and I don't mean to offend your intelligence or insult your status in life by comparing you and your business to this story, but when it's over, I think you will understand. I live in the Midwestern part of the United States, and our winters get pretty cold, and we get a fair amount of snow. And one day in February, I was leaving a lunch appointment and driving back to my office, and there had been snow a day or two earlier, but the sun was shining and it was melting, and everything was very dirty. And it was so dirty that I couldn't see out the window of my car. So I stopped into a gas station and decided I would get a car wash. After all, there was a big sign out front that said car wash. And so as I filled up the car with gasoline, I kept waiting for the computer and the gas pump to offer me the opportunity to purchase a car wash. But that opportunity never came. Eventually, it just gave me my receipt. Well, I was in a hurry and a little frustrated by this, so I walked into the little store part of the gas station, and I went up to the clerk behind the counter, and I said, "Your gas pump never offered me a car wash." And he said, "Well, that's because the car wash is broken." I said, "Seriously? That's the only reason I came here." And then the man looked at me and said, "That car wash hasn't worked in 2 years. And I said to him, "Really? 2 years? 2 years, huh?" And he says, "Yep, 2 years. I don't think they're ever going to fix it." And I said, "If you don't mind me asking," I pointed to the sign outside, and I said, "What does that sign out there say?" And he said, rather sheepishly, "Car wash?" I said, "So you're telling me for 2 years the sign has been advertising a car wash that does not work?" At that point in time, he said, "Sir, I think you should go somewhere else." So I did. And again, I don't want to insult you by comparing your work to a guy who sells car washes at a counter, but I think you understand where I'm going with this, and that is we as professionals and the bigger we as sales teams and companies constantly must ask, are we doing what we say we do? After all, if we are going through all of this trouble to figure out what it is that clients truly value, and then trying to build trust with them as quickly and as effectively as we can, but in the end, we're not true to our word, what good does it do? And how in any way would that help us make more sales and build a career-long selling relationship with that company or that person? So as we wind up, I have a couple of questions for you to ponder over the next week. And again, if you are in charge of a sales team, whether it be large or small, I would hope that you would ask these questions of your team as well. Number one, when you think about your best clients, what are the things they most commonly value about you, your company, and your products and services? So think about those clients and think, what do they most value? And then you think to yourself, how can we expand on that? Are we portraying that the right way? And you may also want to have your sales team think, well, are we asking the right questions to figure out exactly how we can customize our products and services to what they value? Second question, what are some moments of truth that you and your sales team have had to pass with your clients over the years, and how did you pass those moments of truth? You recall just a few moments ago I said that's one of the ways we build trust. You have the opportunity to serve them or not serve them. You have the opportunity to tell the truth or to lie. You have the opportunity to do something in your best interest or in the client's best interest. And when you choose the client's best interest, you pass a moment of truth. So think about some of the scenarios that typically happen in your company when it comes to passing moments of truth, and then rehearse those as a sales team. Talk to each other and figure out what are the best techniques for proving trust and passing those moments of truth that are unique to your company and your industry. And then the final question, how can you instill a culture within your sales team that encourages everyone to find true client value without ever assuming it? How can you instill a culture within your team that encourages everyone to find true client value without assuming it? And when I say culture, ladies and gentlemen, I mean it. I mean, this is something we have to work to develop because, again, as I said, The natural inclination of a salesperson is to talk until they're out of breath, and they pretend to listen but don't really hear. And we have to start that and practice that and demand that over the course of time. Well, that ends my prepared remarks for today's webinar. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Ali Joffrey, and we could open up for question, answers, and discussion. Ali, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Beals, for a very, very intriguing presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could either raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on the console, so if you click on it, you shall be able to speak directly with Mr. Jeff Beals. Let me go to the question box. The first question. It is one thing to talk about the importance of listening in a sales webinar and another thing to actually live it while out in the field. Some of the best salespeople I know talk a great deal. How do they manage to be successful when you say it's so important to listen twice as much as we talk?
You know, I'm glad you asked that, and a lot of people will ask me that question because oftentimes a person will say, well, I know a salesperson who doesn't listen at all. He just goes in there and talks constantly, and no one seems to mind. And he makes $1 million every year. How does he make that happen? And I like to say there are exceptions to every rule. Perhaps there are some salespeople that talk people into submission, if you will. But probably a better answer or a better question I would have for you is, how much business is that person missing because they are not listening? You know, if you have a $1 million salesperson, could they be a $2 million salesperson if they did a better job of listening? I think I mentioned this earlier in the webinar. I'm always dismayed when I work with someone, and then I go and I observe them in the field for a day, and they continue to spend all their time talking. And so it's something that is an art. It is a habit. It is something that has to be practiced and instilled, but it is well worth someone's time. One of the things that works for me is I go into a sales meeting thinking to myself, okay, for the first 20 minutes or so, I don't want to do too much talking. If I do, it's just to maybe affirm something they said or maybe just mention a feature benefit very, very briefly. But for the most part, that first 20 to 25 minutes, I am going to spend asking questions quite specifically. And one other thing that helps me that might work for some of you, I don't ever write down questions I'm going to ask. I know some salespeople and sales leaders will recommend that. I don't. What I do is I write down the pieces of information I absolutely must get. And I ask whatever questions are necessary to get those. So if I have a list of 5 or 6 pieces of information I must know about a prospect in order to advance the question, I will keep asking whatever questions pop into my head or seem appropriate based on the last answer until I get those 5 or 6 pieces of information. If you script your questions instead of the answers you need to get, you're likely to be locked into a narrow-minded frame of mind or a narrow-minded way of thinking, and that's dangerous. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Let me move to another question. How do you control the flow of the sales talk when you're pressed on time and have to share all of our products and services, considering the prospect customer has given you an appointment for a very, very limited time to meet and present or showcase our services?
That is a very good question, and it's a very common problem. Oftentimes, when you'll make an appointment with someone, their administrative assistant might say, okay, you have 20 minutes with him. And sometimes you're lucky to get that. So everything in that 20-minute period of time becomes sped up. But a couple things I've noticed. First of all, even if it is a very short period of time, you still want to spend the preponderance of that time asking questions and probing, because that still matters. You're just going to have to ask a little quicker, and you might not be able to ask all of the questions that you had. Secondly, you're probably going to make a little bit of your pitch at the end, and if it's a type of thing where you sell quickly, you'll just have to speed everything up. If it's a relationship building sale or a long sales cycle like some products or services have, that's probably just your first exposure. and may continue the selling process virtually, over the telephone, or perhaps with additional subsequent meetings. You have to judge that a little bit for yourself. But I think in probably 90 or 95% of the cases, even if you are limited to a 15 or a 20-minute meeting, you still want to spend the preponderance of that time making sales. Now, a related question, oftentimes people will say to me, yeah, that works great when you are in person, but how do you do that when you're doing something on the telephone? Well, first of all, when you make telephone calls, chances are you're going to reach a voicemail. And when that happens, what I recommend is you leave a very short voicemail that focuses on one typical value that the typical prospect or client has about your product, feature it, and talk about calling back. And you keep calling and calling until you get the person. And oftentimes, some people gasp when they hear what I'm about ready to say, but often it takes 8 to 10 of those little voicemails, each one with a different item of value that you feature, before you actually get the decision maker. The nice thing about that, though, is that once you get them, they're usually intrigued enough that they'll actually spend 5 or 10 minutes with you on the phone, and that will allow you to answer, or rather to ask some of those questions. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much. We have another one. Just a second. Okay. How do you share legitimate information about your products or your company without making it appear as if you are pushing product information on a prospect too soon in the selling process?
Yeah, again, a lot of people have that natural temptation to get started with it. I think as long as you do focus on what we've been talking about in this webinar of asking before talking, and really figuring out what people want, you're probably going to be okay. Again, we want to have the information that we need in our heads, not the questions that we ask. But when it does come time to make your pitch, to make your presentation, a few things to keep in mind. You don't want to do it 100% canned. Even if you're going to pull out your iPad and have a pre-prepared presentation there. You can have a prepared presentation on your iPad, but as you go through each slide and you show each graphic or you share each piece of information, customize it. Say things like, well, you said earlier that one of your biggest goals or challenges is XYZ, and this product meets that by doing ABC. And so you always want to customize it, even if you are simply going through a prepared presentation. And one other thing about the prepared presentation, as you are explaining how your products and features are customized exactly to what they value, if you can ever share it in the form of a story, it tends to be received better and is more memorable. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question. With the easy availability of so much product service information online, prospective clients already know many details about our products, services before they even contact us. This means that sales cycles are now shorter. In this environment, how can we still develop the trust?
Yeah, a lot of people are intimidated by these short sales cycles, because if your model was to build trust with a client, very slowly over 3 or 4 meetings, each one of those meetings over a long lunch, you're probably not going to get that anymore. And so that intimidates some people who are very, very relationship focused. All we have to do is just speed up the process. I think if we focus on learning exactly what we want, we're okay. And remember, I gave you that statistic earlier that said 70 to 75% of the sales cycle is already completed by the client before they reached you, because the client can learn so much online. They have easy access to your existing clients. They can personally call those people and ask for their experiences. And in many cases, people can put reviews, good or bad, about your products or services on any social platform they like. And so again, sometimes people are intimidated about this. What I say is, it's kind of liberating knowing that you only have to worry about 25 to 30% of the sales cycle. And so just do what is right, do the fundamentals, but know that you're just going to do everything on a little bit of a accelerated timeline, but the old fundamentals still apply, because in the end, people really want a service provider to make them confident in the company, to make them confident in the product. And when you take the time to figure out exactly how to customize the product to their value and build trust, it shows, and they feel it, and you will likely win that piece of business.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Jeff Beals. That really brings us towards the end of the webinar. Any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss out?
Well, the marketplace is only going to get more competitive. There are so many things vying for your client's attention, and as I mentioned earlier, many of them are doing more with less because of cut downs and cutbacks in corporate workforces. Never forget that your buyers are under a great deal of pressure, both institutionally and personally. And the person who can build trust and figure out what they value is even more important in that atmosphere than it was 10 or 20 years ago when more resources were available. And with that, I want to wish everyone the best of success, both personally and professionally, and I hope everyone knows that it's been my honor to share this hour with each of you.
Well, the feelings are mutual. Thank you very much, Mr. Beals. I really want to thank you on behalf of the Madinah Institute for Leadership and Entrepreneurship for your valuable time, for delivering this live webinar on our platform. So thank you very much. And thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording it. Please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to learn about our upcoming webinars and to access the archive section. With that note, I would like to end and conclude, so you all will be automatically dismissed out. You all have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling.